Joining us now, columnist of the Washington Examiner, Kristen Solstice Anderson. Kristen, thank you so much for being with us the day after Christmas. I trust that you got a lot of Gator gear under the Christmas tree yesterday.
Oh yes, my new golden retriever has a Gator bandana, so he's ready for bowl game season.
Okay, very exciting. Hey, I'm sure you saw Matt Lewis's column in the Daily Beast. It's fascinating. I want to get your take on it. It's called "I'm a Christian and a Conservative. Trump is making it terribly hard to be both." And Matt writes in part this: increasingly, my faith and my political loyalties are at odds, and sometimes even seem to be mutually exclusive. Trump's fundamental character deficiencies are part of the problem. We all fall short. But Christians aspire to bring about the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These virtues aren't just out of step in today's society, they are utterly countercultural in Trump's Republican Party. Unlike Ronald Reagan's sunny optimism rooted in faith in America's future, Trump motivates via fear. His worldview is rooted in a scarcity mentality that says someone else is stealing your share of the pie. This carnal mindset clashes with a faith that calls us to gladly give to others. I'm speaking here about personal charity, not redistribution via the tax code, and trusts in God to provide for our daily needs. Of course, I haven't even delved into the personal baggage. I'm no prude or saint. I pray and I take my kids to church, but I freely admit that I'm a sinner in need of grace and constant forgiveness. God's mercy humbles me daily. Donald Trump, however, revels in at least 5 of the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, and wrath. This isn't a new development, of course, but with every passing minute, it becomes clearer that it would take a miracle for him to change. We all fall short, Kristen, but Matt says, he talks about that the fruits of the Spirit are actually countercultural to what now is basically the MO for the Republican Party.
This has been something that's been one of the more distressing, sort of slow motion tragedies that's occurred over the last couple of years. This didn't start the moment Donald Trump became president. It started the moment he came down the escalator and went to the top of the polls in the Republican primary. What Matt defines in his column is, I think, completely in line with what conservatism ought to be. That those values of selflessness, of optimism, that shouldn't be separate from what we think conservatism is. And while I won't hold Matt responsible for the headline, I know writers don't always pick the headlines for their columns, I don't think that we should be defining conservatism and Trump's Republican Party as the same thing. They're different these days. Trump won because he was able to say, look, I'm not fighting over who's going to be the most conservative. I want to be this populist guy. But it's incredibly distressing. I mean, you see these stories of an 8-year-old who dies in custody at the hands of, an immigration policy this administration has furthered, and it's for a lot of Republicans having to try to say, well, we need border security, which yes, we absolutely do, but gosh, isn't there a way to achieve that without policies that have 8-year-olds dying on Christmas? This is, I think, the moral quandary of the modern Republican Party. But it's not a surprise. It didn't start overnight. This has been something that has been slow motion in progress for the last 3.5 years.
Well, what's been so surprising to me, though, about evangelicals supporting Donald Trump at a record rate, it has to do with exactly what Matt Lewis is suggesting here, and not even talking about the personal sins or the fact that Donald Trump seems to revel in it. I mean, this is a guy, Christians believe we are saved by grace. Donald Trump has said he hasn't ever asked God for forgiveness because he doesn't need to. But being an evangelical, and there have been secular studies of this, the reason why America has done so well is its faith has been an optimistic faith. Evangelicals believe we have all fallen, but what? We're saved by God's grace. Yes, there's the crucifixion, but there's the resurrection. And again, I'm not saying this to delve into Christianity in any way other than explaining why evangelical America, why Ronald Reagan's vision of America has excelled the way it has because it's always optimistic. But as Matt says, Trump's is just the opposite. And I don't know how so many evangelical leaders have fallen under his sway because of this.
Well, there's been shifts in, if you take a look at what people say are morally acceptable behaviors, one of the biggest shifts we've seen over the last few years is the rise in evangelical Christians saying that things like adultery are okay, that people are sort of reshaping their moral worldview to adapt to their political worldview. Now, that's not everyone, and I also think it's important to point out that there are plenty of evangelical believers who are at odds with where evangelical leaders, proclaimed evangelical leaders are on many of these issues, that there is a difference there. But people are sort of reshaping the way they say they feel on certain moral issues to make it fit what they believe they need politically in order to get the judges that they want, et cetera. Now, what I think is going to be interesting is to watch over the next couple of months if the two things really holding the Republican coalition together were judges and the stock market and a booming economy. If you start losing one of those pieces of the puzzle while Trump at the same time is embarking on a foreign policy that is being condemned widely from even within his own party, can he hold this together? Can he still sustain that level of support even from many evangelicals? I think as long as the courts are still in play, the answer is a qualified yes.
Susan Del Percio, let me go to you with Andrew Ferguson's article in Commentary Magazine. By the way, if you get a chance, while we're talking about Andrews, look at Andrew Sullivan's. I think David Brooks linked it today in the New York Times. Look at Andrew Sullivan's column on the new religion, and that goes exactly to what Crystal was just talking about how politics, unfortunately, has usurped faith and basic Christian theology for so many conservative Americans today. But let's move on, Susan, to Andrew Ferguson. He wrote for Commentary Magazine what he calls Charles Krauthammer's final point. And in it he writes, what does it mean in the long term when the nation's conservative party becomes stamped with a style of governing that consists of casual lies, exaggerations, childish and personal and public attacks on subordinates and on political opponents, hush money to old lovers, disregard for simple propriety and good manners? What does it cost when the lies and the other trademarks of Trumpism are deployed in service of the traditional Republican principles of small government and individual liberty? Sooner or later, those ideals must lose their appeal in the minds of the voting public, owing to their association with a leader two-thirds of them cannot abide. How long before the Trumpian means discredit the conservative ends? And Susan, I didn't have to go out and search for columns that lined up to criticize Trump from the right. That seems to be what most everybody is writing about, or what so many people, so many conservatives are writing about this morning, this weekend, this past week. It's almost as if a lot of people are waking up to the realization that the bill for Trumpism on conservatism is coming due.
Right, Joe. And it seems like people were willing to support Trump, a man with no core values, but now they're turning because they see he's affecting the values of our country. That optimism, that we are a global leader, and that his lack of morality in many ways is now truly affecting how our country's perceived in not just globally, but with each other. And it's causing such distress and such harm, and we're not looking forward, and we're not looking to work together. We're all about separation and who we can turn on. And that's where I think the conservative values are really being stretched, and that we have to, Trump has to be called out. I don't know how else to put it. And the more that this happens, the better it is for our country, because the man is destroying the core values of our country now. The better it is for the country, the better it is for the Republican Party,
the better it is for the conservative movement. And here's another one. This is from Jonah Goldberg this weekend, writing about why the Trump presidency will end poorly. Jonah notes this. Weirdly, it's gotten to the point that when I say President Trump is not a man of good character, I feel like I should preface it with a trigger warning for many of my fellow conservatives. Most of the angry responses are rooted in the fact they do not wish to be reminded of this obvious truth. But others seem to have convinced themselves that Trump is a man of good character, and they take personal offense at the insult, even though I usually offer it as little more than an observation. Kristen, last word. At this point, it's hard to deny what has been in front of people for 2-3 years.
Yeah, again, none of this should be surprising. I think the reason why you have an awful lot of conservatives who, nonetheless, we've seen terrible behavior out of the president, but stick by him, is they think, well, he is the means to the end, as was mentioned in the previous column, but also they voted for him. They support him. If all of a sudden they were to say, wow, I made a mistake, it's very hard. People don't like saying, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I should have criticized this man more. That asking people to sort of go and see that sort of blind faith that they had and that maybe it was wrong. This is a more flawed man than you bargained for. People don't like making that admission, hence the angry emails that folks like Jonah get.
Yeah, we all make mistakes every day. We'll see if more conservatives admit to that. Kristen Soltis Anderson, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. We're going to get Rick and Jean's views on these columns and much more coming up. And we're also going to be talking about day 5 of the government shutdown and President Trump digging in, saying the government will not be reopened until he gets his border wall. Our slats. The Washington Post's Philip Rucker joins us with his latest reporting. Morning Joe, back in a moment. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.